All right. Hello, everyone. Welcome to everyone that has joined us for this webinar. We're very happy that you could be here with us and very excited to get this underway. My name is Veronica. I am the Events and Communications Coordinator at the Oak Ridges Marine Land Trust, and we're joined by Kaylin McManus of Birds Canada. She'll be speaking with us in just a couple minutes. Before we get into our presentation, I would like to do a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that Indigenous peoples have had and continue to have presence and deep connection with the lands on and near the Oak Ridges Moraine, a part of what is known to the Indigenous peoples of North America as Turtle Island. These lands, the lands that the Land Trust operates on, are the meeting place of two treaties, the lands of the Mississaugas of the Credit and those of the Chippewas of Georgina Island, Rama, and Beausoleil, and of the Mississaugas of Alderville, Curve Lake, Hiawatha, and Scugog Island, the First Nations of the Williams Treaties. We would like to thank them and other Indigenous peoples for sharing this land with us. We acknowledge that Indigenous people have been subjected to colonial oppression and injustice, which continues to this day. We acknowledge that the first step to reconciliation is recognizing Indigenous people and their inherent rights to the land. We will continue to create a better future for our relationship with Indigenous peoples and the land. The Oak Ridges Marine Land Trust endeavors to honor the land and its treaties by ensuring healthy ecosystems that thrive forever. We recognize that working together with Indigenous peoples to include ecological traditional knowledge systems moves us towards an equitable and sustainable future. And that equitable and sustainable future will continue to be a theme in everything we do. And we're here today to talk about different knowledge systems and different ways that we can all contribute. About 90% of the moraine, this land that we're working on, is privately owned. And that means that the Land Trust depends on working with landowners who share our commitment and our passion for the land to protect and steward it. Our goal is that future generations can continue to experience nature as we do today. And we have several different tools that we can look at in just a moment. If anyone is unfamiliar with the Land Trust, it is a nonprofit charitable organization. We acquire land or interests in land for conservation, and we can do that through raising funds to purchase land, receiving donations, or setting up conservation easements. We are contributing to the federal government's goal of protecting 30% of land by 2030. And that may seem like the biggest thing, but we have a lot of other operations that we carry out at the same time. We do things like this, education outreach to connect people and nature. We support climate change resiliency, and we're protecting green corridors between natural areas. With your support, we protect ecologically significant lands on and near the moraine forever. There are tax benefits for protecting green spaces. If you have a property of over 25 acres or more, our conservation advisor, Bill Lockheed, would love to hear from you to discuss the different options you might be interested in, because you may be eligible for income tax or capital gains tax reductions or credits. I will include Bill's contact information in the follow-up email. And one final thing that I do want to make sure I talk about. We talk about a lot about protecting land, but we, as I just said, we do have other projects, and one that we're very proud of is habitat restoration for the Kirtland's warbler. This is a warbler, sometimes known as the bird of fire, because it relies very specifically on jack pine, possibly some red pine, a young forest for breeding habitat. And jack pine is a species of tree whose seeds will only germinate when exposed to very high heat, hence the fire. We are aiming to restore 400 hectares of grassland and pine oak communities. We're on our way there. We have 3 properties in Northumberland that are together in a little cluster with connection that we are restoring to create this ideal habitat. If you'd like more information, there is lots to be found on our website. And on to our feature presentation. So we have Kaylin with us today. Kaylin is part of the Ontario Breeding Bird Atlas. This is a collaborative project that maps the distribution of birds that breed in Ontario. And I will turn it over to you, Kaylin.
Great, thank you. I'm so excited to be here and to be talking about birds and the Breeding Bird Atlas and community science. So I'll just share my screen here. Make sure I share it out. Okay, you're seeing that all right?
There we go.
Awesome. Okay, great. Yes, so I'm Kaylin. I'm here to talk backyard birds and big impacts. I work for Birds Canada, which is a not-for-profit organization dedicated to bird conservation. Our mission is to drive action to increase the understanding, appreciation, and conservation of birds in Canada. So I work on the Ontario Breeding Bird Atlas Project, which is a community science project that has thousands of volunteers who have contributed data. I'm really thankful for the opportunity to essentially integrate my passion for nature and bird watching with my desire to connect with people. I am a self-proclaimed people person, so I love birds, I love people, and the fact that I get to, watch birds and talk to people is really just great for me. So I'm just going to get us started with a quick question. What birds have you noticed around your property recently? So if you know the names of some of the birds that you've seen lately, feel free to pop them in the chat. I've included some here that I think you might have on your property or nearby your property, like the American goldfinch, the top left there. That one is in its winter plumage, kind of going from winter to spring. The eastern kingbird that you might see on wires or fences at the top there. The northern cardinal, which I've been hearing outside of my office window all day today. Barn swallow, which I'll be talking a little bit more in just a bit. Downy woodpeckers, red-winged blackbirds, or any other species that you might have heard recently. I'm just going to open the chat here, so my apologies if a kingfisher, yep, a belted kingfisher, I love to hear those. Cardinal, red-winged blackbird, grackles, red-winged blackbird, more goldfinches, northern cardinal, an American goldfinch, urban backyard. That's great. I love hearing about what people have been seeing. I love seeing the goldfinches at our feeder. Blue jays, yes, that's true. That's one I actually forgot to put on this slide, but I love seeing the blue jays and hearing them in the springtime. Any other bird species? What have I been seeing lately? I've been seeing lots of robins near my house, lots of goldfinches, cardinals, juncos. Yep, dark-eyed juncos. So those ones will be heading up north. Orioles, that's a great Baltimore oriole. I just saw one on the weekend when I was helping my mom out in the garden. So yeah, lots of really awesome, great backyard. Oh, chipping sparrows. Yep, chipping and song sparrows, something that some other folks haven't necessarily mentioned yet. Hummingbirds. Amazing. So it sounds like you guys know a lot of your birds already, which is great. You're going to make my job a lot easier throughout this presentation. Amazing. And if you don't know your birds just yet, that's okay. We're going to be learning a few species that you might see on your properties throughout the presentation. So, whether you have a little bit of base knowledge or if you're just brand new to birds, that's okay. We're going to be talking about them. So I'll first start, sorry, I have to keep moving my head around, but I'll first start just with the State of Canada's Birds Report. And so the State of Canada's Birds is a national report that looks at how bird populations are changing over time. So what's really important here is that this kind of report is built using information collected by thousands of people through community science programs. So a lot of what we know about birds in Canada comes from people paying attention to what they see and hear and sharing that information over time. So whether you're a bird expert and you're recording all sorts of birds all across the province or country, or you know the birds that are local to your plot of land or your local area, all of that information is really important for tracking how those birds are doing. So what this graph shows us is that while some groups are doing really well, some are declining. So especially grassland birds and aerial insectivores that you can kind of see down at the bottom here, aerial insectivores and grassland birds. Aerial insectivores are birds that eat flying insects while they're flying, just for reference. I know that's not kind of a common thing. And so, yeah, this is showing the change from 1970 until 2020. And this report just came out in the last year or two in 2024. The important thing here is that we're able to detect these changes, and that's only possible because of long-term data collected across the country. Honestly, the amount of data that is collected is quite astounding. I'll be talking about the Ontario Breeding Bird Atlas in a little bit, and that's only just a small piece of kind of this community science and volunteer data that's collected. All right, so you folks are obviously quite familiar with the Oak Ridges Moraine. And so obviously one of the most important natural landscapes in Southern Ontario. What makes it so valuable is the mix of forests, wetlands, and farmlands, which are all connected across the landscape. So this area is not only important for local birds, like breeding birds, the ones that I study, who stay and breed in these habitats, but it's also important for birds who stop over on their long migrations, which can sometimes be 10,000 or more kilometers, which is kind of mind-boggling to think about. There's lots of tiny little songbirds or small bird species that migrate all the way to Argentina, which is crazy to me. All right, so we've got forests, we've got open farmland, wetlands, all within relatively short distances. So some folks were saying that they were hearing chipping sparrows or song sparrows. Other people were saying that they were hearing belted kingfishers. All of those species need kind of different habitats in order to breed or even just along their migration. Some species need deep forest, other species need open fields, and some even move between habitats. So what kind of birds might you actually find around your property? That depends on the habitats that are available. All right, so I'm going to start just with some grassland and open area birds. Some of these, like the barn swallows, just need the open area to forage and will nest elsewhere, whereas other species like the eastern meadowlark and the bobolink actually nest in those grasslands or open habitats. Just so you know, throughout this presentation, I'm going to be playing some sounds, some bird sounds specifically. Some of them can get kind of high pitched. If you have like headphones in, just make sure they're not turned up all the way. I really don't want to deafen anyone. Make sure that your sound is at kind of a reasonable decibel so that this doesn't become uncomfortable for your ears. All right, so first, and maybe I'm a little bit biased here, but very cool bird species is the barn swallow. I actually did my master's on barn swallows, cliff swallows, and tree swallows, so I feel like I may be a little biased on this one, but I think they're very cool. They're one of the most familiar birds in rural areas, and one that many of you have probably seen around your property. A telltale sign of a barn swallow is the forked tail, which you can see in the photo on the right there. Obviously, the tail there is quite fanned out. Usually it just looks like kind of a little peace sign or fork when it's in flight. But I thought that was kind of a neat photo that I wanted to share. You'll often see them flying low over fields, pastures, or water, catching insects in the air. So that's why they're called aerial insectivores, because they catch flying insects while they're flying, which is honestly quite incredible to watch. They really just kind of zip them right out of the air. Could be mosquitoes, flies, really quite anything. One of the things that makes them unique is their relationship with people. So barn swallows actually nest almost entirely on human-made structures. Now, not entirely, but mostly. Things like barns, sheds, bridges, or even under the eaves of houses. You probably notice how crafty they can be. You can see the photo at the bottom there, this one. They don't necessarily have to have anything fully jutting out to be able to make that nest. Even something as simple as that wire will give them a bit of a head start to start packing that mud on and creating that cup-shaped nest. Yeah, so if you've ever noticed the small mud nest attached to a beam or wall, there's a good chance it belonged to a barn swallow. Despite being a familiar bird here, they're actually long-distance migrants. So the birds we see in Ontario travel all the way to Central and South America during our winter time, and then come back here each spring to breed. So yeah, this is a good example of a species that's still fairly common, but has declined quite a bit since around the 1970s. So because of that, they're now considered a species of special concern in Canada. I'm not have the chat open, but has anyone seen barn swallows flying around their property? Sometimes they're in sheds, sometimes they're just kind of the eaves on your houses or barns, hence the name the barn swallow. But has anyone seen barn swallows? And while I wait for people to answer the chat, maybe you've heard a barn swallow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to play the barn swallow sound, and maybe you folks can let me know if you've ever seen or heard them. Hopefully everyone can hear the sound. Not just being here silently. That clicking noise I always thought was really cute. So that's the barn swallow sound. I don't see anyone in the chat. Can someone let me know at least if you guys can hear it? I don't want to keep going with the presentation and you guys can't hear what I'm doing.
The sound did come across on my
Excellent.
machine, so I think it's working.
Thank you. Okay, awesome. All right, well, on to the next species. Next, we have the eastern meadowlark. So this is an iconic bird of open farmland and grasslands. If you've ever heard a clear whistling song coming from a fence post or out in a field, there's a good chance it was an eastern meadowlark. Some chats. All right, sorry, just going back to the barn swallow, but some people said they haven't seen any there for decades, and then some had them nesting in the boathouse. So yeah, definitely some mixed reviews on whether people have seen those barn swallows around. Yeah, feel free to keep chatting in the chat. If you've seen any of these bird species as I go along, I would love to hear about it. I love hearing about people's experiences with birds. But yeah, the eastern meadowlark, such a cool species. The bright yellow is always very cool to see, especially when you can actually catch them kind of standing out on the fence post and singing, getting a really, really good look at them. Meadowlarks rely almost entirely on open habitats, things like hay fields, pastures, and large grassy areas. So they actually nest right on the ground, hidden in the tall grass. So this picture of the tall grass, imagine this nest kind of just hidden amongst all of the grasses there. Definitely a hard one to find. So when you do see them, it's usually because they're perched on a fence post or a small tree singing and essentially claiming their territory. So they were once very common across Ontario, but eastern meadowlark, along with other grassland bird species, have declined quite a bit, and as a result are now listed as threatened in Ontario. They're a really good example of species that depends on working landscapes, so places like farms or rural properties and grasslands. So yeah, if anyone has seen any eastern meadowlark or even heard them singing, which I'll show you guys here. So that one is the eastern meadowlark. And again, let me know if you've heard one or seen one. I feel like the yellow breast really gives them away. Alrighty, another grassland bird species and one that is truly iconic. And honestly, I quite love their hairdos is the bobolink. So strongly tied to open farmland and grasslands. So they're really unique, both in how they look and how they sound. Males have a striking black and white plumage that you can see here at the top with that little hairdo that I particularly love. And then the females are more of a brown color. It helps them to camouflage on a nest. Their song is really bubbly. It's described as a musical series of notes. I don't think you can accurately describe it in just such terms. I really like to think that they sound like R2-D2, and you can tell me if I'm right as soon as I play the song in just a minute. But like the meadowlarks, bobolink rely heavily on hayfields and grassy areas. They nest directly on the ground, just like the meadowlarks. You can see the nest at the bottom here. So very hard to see and very hard to find. Again, like the other grassland birds have declined over time, but they do have an incredible migration similar to the barn swallow. So all the way to South America for winter, some as far as Argentina. So a single field here can really be part of a huge migration that spans about half the globe, which is very cool. All right, so I'm going to play the bobolink song. Let me know if you've seen a bobolink before or heard a bobolink. And let me know if you also think that this sounds like R2D2, because I am somewhat convinced that it does. All right, what's the verdict? R2D2 sounding or not? Definitely let me know in the chat. Okay, next up is the Redwing. I get a thumbs up. Okay, awesome. I think at least some folks agree with me that we have an R2D2. Okay, awesome. Debbie thinks we have an R2D2 sound alike as well. So not completely off track here. So if you ever hear R2D2 out in your fields, you'll know now that you have some bobolink, which is very cool. All right, next up, red-winged blackbird. I feel like most folks have seen or can recognize red-winged blackbirds. All right. So you'll typically find them around wetlands, ponds, roadside ditches, anywhere that there's water and tall vegetation. The males are especially easy to identify with the red kind of shoulder on the wing, and they're a blackbird, so the name is pretty apt there. The female, less so. Again, a brown bird, harder to identify for sure. I feel like once you get some of the streaking in there and the very pointy beak, it's somewhat easy to tell apart from the bobolink in the previous slide. They're probably just as famous for their call. My fiance likes to say that it sounds like they're just yelling at you, which it does to me as well. So yeah, birds like this are often the ones that people first start noticing and reporting through community science programs, which is great. Even common species play an important role in helping us understand how bird populations are changing over time. All right, we have more messages and very territorial. Yes, if you've been dive bombed by a red-winged blackbird, you definitely know what Bonnie is talking about here. They can be very territorial of their nests for sure. All right, so red-winged blackbirds, this is their call. So if you haven't necessarily seen the red-winged blackbirds, as you can see, they nest in those tall grasses or tall vegetation. So might not always be the easiest birds to see, but you can definitely hear them. Okay, so far we've looked at birds that use open areas like fields, but forests and wooded areas support a completely different group of species. So if you have trees on your forest, on your property, you may have already noticed birds like these. And a lot of forest birds are actually heard more often than they're seen, which can make them a bit more challenging to identify. I will say there is an app. It's called Merlin Bird ID. It's put out through Cornell Lab of Ornithology. And that one has an audio recording that in real time will help you identify birds that you're hearing on your property. So if you do have a forest or you do have birds on your property and you're not quite sure what you're hearing, you can always use the Merlin app to help you try to figure it out. There is one caveat. Of course, the Merlin ID app is not 100% correct, so just beware with some of those results. But I feel like it's such a great learning tool because it tells you in real time what you might be hearing, and over time you can learn what those calls and songs are. Nice, Bonnie. Have you used the Merlin ID app before? It sounds like you might enjoy it, and so maybe we can put some other people onto it too. Okay, we're getting some thumbs ups. All right, if you've ever spent time in a mature forest and heard an echoing flute-like song, which I'll play in a second, there's a good chance it was a wood thrush. So it's often described as one of the most beautiful bird songs in the forest, and I do tend to agree. I love a thrush song. Wood thrushes rely on relatively large mature forests, especially those with a healthy understory for their nesting. They tend to stay hidden, so people often hear them before they ever see them. And like some of the other species we've talked about, wood thrush species have declined and they're now considered threatened in Canada. So even just knowing that a species like this is present in a forested area and sharing that information can be really valuable through community science. All right, wood thrush. One of my favorite sounds for sure. Oh, let me put it here. Yeah, feel free to let me know in the chat if you've heard of wood thrush. I feel like maybe this one is one that's not quite as common as some of the other bird species, or at least maybe not reported as often. All right, another one is the scarlet tanager. So this is another forest bird. One thing I hear so frequently from people when I give these presentations is that they didn't know that we had such striking birds here in Ontario. They think that maybe they would have to go down south somewhere to find something that is so vibrant and so red, but here we have the scarlet tanager right here in our backyards. Awesome. Yeah, so we're hearing some of these birds in their backyards in forested areas, which is really awesome. Getting some comments in the chat, which is great. I love when folks tell me about their experiences. Yeah, scarlet tanager, one of the most striking birds that you might have in a forest, even though people might not realize it because they're so well hidden. It's crazy to think that you might be able to hide something as bright as a scarlet tanager, but as soon as the trees are leafed out, it can be quite challenging to see up there. The males are bright red with black wings, as you can see. But the females, this is the female right here, this grumpy looking one at the bottom, are a little bit more drab. They spend most of their time high up in the canopy, and that's where they make their nests as well. So rather than making them in the understory like the wood thrush, they make their nests higher up in the trees. So these are another long distance migrant as well, spending the winter in South America before returning here to breed. So they're a great reminder that even familiar looking woodlots can support some pretty remarkable species. You don't even have to take that trip down south to find them. I will say that the song of the scarlet tanager does sound a little bit like a robin. So it's described as a robin with a sore throat. I feel like I can hear how it is like a horse robin, but I think when you're first learning, it can be sometimes difficult to distinguish from robins for sure. Okay, and then our last forest bird species that we're going to go over here is the downy woodpecker. So downy woodpeckers are very cute. They're about sparrow-sized. They're one of the smallest and most common woodpeckers in Ontario. The downy woodpecker and hairy woodpecker pretty well look the same, I will say, except for that the downy woodpecker is about sparrow-sized and the hairy woodpecker is about robin-sized. So if you've seen a really big downy woodpecker, then it was a hairy woodpecker. You'll often hear them tapping or drumming on trees, which is how they communicate and how they search for food. So instead of singing to attract a mate, the downy woodpeckers will drum or essentially bang on the trees to attract a mate instead. So they're a great example of species that uses both forests and backyards. A lot of people may have them around without realizing it, but if you have a feeder, they'll sometimes come to those. My dad has a bird feeder and he gets a downy woodpecker there quite frequently. They're very cute. I thought these pictures of the young were especially cute, personally. And this is the sound of the drumming. Oh, nice. We have some in the chat. Nice. Some people have some downy woodpeckers at their feeder. And Leslie says she... Oh, nice. Yep. Downies in the yard, using the hummingbird feeder, coming to feeders. Lots of people are hearing them. Yeah, so that's great. I heard one just outside my window earlier today. I love to hear the woodpeckers. They're cute little things and you actually get to see them out in the open too. Only I got to see something as cute as this little young one. Okay, so some other backyard birds that might not have been mentioned, might have been mentioned. Black-capped chickadees are some of them, white-breasted nuthatches, mourning doves, American robins, American goldfinch. Yeah, white-breasted nuthatch, I will say, is one of my favorites. I think they're very cute. They do come to the feeders as well. Mourning doves are a very fun little bird. I know a lot of people have had them kind of nesting around their properties. Um, if you can call what they make a nest, they essentially just put a couple twigs on the ground or nearby and call it a day. So yeah, it's great what we can find when we're really looking for it. Um, yeah, whether it's in open fields, wetlands, or forests, there's a huge variety of species using the landscape. So, how we've looked at kind of the range of birds and what you might find around your property, but how do we actually know this? How do we know which birds are here or how their populations are changing over time? A lot of information we have, as I said earlier, comes from community science projects, where people contribute observations of the birds they see and hear. When those observations are collected over large areas and over many years, they allow us to track changes in bird populations. All right, we have another chat here. Oh, yep, someone has mourning doves nesting on their awnings. That's awesome. And this picture here is of a ruby-throated hummingbird. It does not have a ruby throat here because this one is a female. But yes, a lot of the information that we have comes from the community. There are lots of bird biologists like me out there, but not as many as there are people who love birds. And so when we all work together as a birding community, we're able to come up with a lot more data than we are kind of in our individual silos. And so that kind of brings me to the Ontario Breeding Bird Atlas. The Ontario Breeding Bird Atlas is by no means the only community science project out there. It's the one that I work on, so I'm the most familiar with. But a lot of the things that we do with the Atlas kind of apply elsewhere in terms of just the data that's collected and how it's used. So I'll talk about the Atlas, but I'll also talk about some other projects later and how to contribute. So the Ontario Breeding Bird Atlas is a project that aims to map the distribution and relative abundance of the around 300 species of breeding birds in Ontario. The atlas occurs kind of in 20-year intervals. So the very first atlas in Ontario was from 1981 to 1985. So 5 years of data collection where we essentially try to go out and find all the bird species that exist in Ontario. That's what Atlas 1 was all about. Was finding, okay, this is an example for Canada goose. Where are all the Canada geese in Ontario? Where do they exist? What is their range? And that was Atlas 1. 20 years later, Atlas 2 came around from 2001 to 2005. And again, we wanted to know, okay, where are all of the birds species in Ontario? Where do they exist? What is their range? In addition to that, we were able to compare back to Atlas 1 to say, how has that distribution changed in the past 20 years? In Atlas 1, the bird species occurred here. In Atlas 2, what has changed? So this is a species account from the final Atlas 2 publication. The left is the write-up just about, in this case, purple martin. And then on the right-hand side, we see a couple of maps. The bottom right-hand map shows the change between the first atlas and the second atlas in terms of where purple martins were found in Ontario. All of those black dots on the map represent places where purple martin were found in the first atlas, so in 80s, and then not found 20 years later in the 2000s. So as you can see, there's a lot of black dots on there. The yellow dots are where they're found in the second atlas, but not the first. There's not very many yellow dots on there, as you can see. So this shows a range contraction or a decrease in those purple martins between the first atlas and the second atlas. The top map in Atlas 2, we were able to model some outputs. I won't get too much into the modeling because even to me, it makes my brain hurt a little bit. But essentially, it shows the relative abundance of purple martins. So where is the highest concentration of purple martins in the province? You can see it's in the kind of far southern Ontario there. So this is also a figure that was in Atlas 2. It's showing the largest increases and decreases in species between the first atlas in the 80s and the second atlas in the 2000s. So some of the largest increases are probably not shocking to some. The biggest increase was in Canada goose. So they were found in over 1,000 more squares, which is just a 10 by 10 kilometer unit. In Atlas 2 than in Atlas 1. That's a huge increase, and I'm sure not a surprise to very many people at all. Some of the biggest decreases are shown on the right in red. Some of those aerial insectivores that I was talking about, so birds that eat flying insects while they're flying, are on that list. Common nighthawk, chimney swift, bank swallow, barn swallow is on there, cliff swallow, purple martin. And so these are some of the comparisons that we were able to make after that 20-year period to say, how are things changing and what does that mean? That brings us to Atlas 3, which is this atlas. The data collection was 2021 to 2025. We just wrapped up data collection, which is a little bittersweet. I'm excited to move on to publishing all of the results, but also, of course, quite sad to not be out in the field and with all the volunteers anymore. But this atlas, we were aiming to determine and map the distribution and relative abundance in, sorry, I have to move my head again, relative abundance of breeding birds from 2021 to 25, and then compare back to Atlas 1 and Atlas 2. We want to determine population size and compare to Atlas 1 and Atlas 2. We want to gather, we wanted to gather data on breeding locations and abundance for species at risk. And we want to ensure data are available for conservation projects, looking at climate change, protected areas, forestry, you name it. If it's a conservation outcome, we want our data to be used for that. So how can we use this sort of data? We have thousands and thousands, well, millions actually, of data points of records of breeding birds across the province. So what do we do with data on the occurrence and relative abundance of bird species over time? So CSIWC and CSIRO, top left there, those are acronyms to define the Committee on the Status of Endangered Wildlife in Canada and the Committee on the Status of Species at Risk in Ontario. So all of this data goes towards recovery strategies and action plans within the federal and provincial government. It goes into figuring out what does critical habitat for these species mean. It goes towards looking at population and distribution objectives. It goes towards conservation planning to determine, relationships to their habitats, what threats might be presented to birds and their habitats, what the effect of climate change can be, and lots more. Maybe even things that we haven't thought of yet, which is why we want the data to be open to as many conservation folks as possible. I think this is really cool just to show the power of people, the power of bird community, and the power of community science. There's a lot of numbers on this, so I'll break it down a little bit here. The table here is showing the second atlas, so 2001 to 2005, and then the third atlas, which just finished in 2025. So atlasers, that's our term for volunteers. We had around 2,000 volunteers 20 years ago, and again, 2,000 volunteers this time around, which is crazy and very cool, very humbling. We had around 300 species. And this is the number of squares, the 10 by 10 kilometer squares that were surveyed, which is amazing, around 5,000. During the last atlas, the data collection methods were a little bit different. So we had around 500,000 records, whereas this time around, we've actually broken 4 million records. So what that means is if I went out and I observed a robin and I submitted that to the atlas, that would be one record. And so that has been done 4 million times by 2,000 people, which is amazing and is so much data and will be so awesome for conservation. Point counts are our own kind of standardized survey. So we have around 100,000 point counts this time around. And then the total hours was 170,000 for that 5-year period. And so this is why community science is just so, so important. I am one person. I have a collaborator who's helping coordinate the project with me. His name is Mike. He's wonderful. But even the two of us could not contribute 170,000 hours in a 5-year period. It's just not possible. And so it's amazing what we can do when we work together. So what does all this data mean? What are some of the outputs? What are we doing here? I have some GIFs just to represent what some of the outputs might look like. This is showing bald eagle change over time between Atlas 1, Atlas 2, and Atlas 3. Again, Atlas 1 is in the 80s, Atlas 2, early 2000s, and then Atlas 3 just finished up in 2025. So for bald eagle populations declined due to the use of DDT. And this is showing that after DDT after we were no longer using DDT in Ontario, bald eagle populations started to bounce back, as you can see here in Atlas 2 and Atlas 3. So this map is really just showing bald eagle populations expanding again. And if anyone has seen a bald eagle, I mean, throughout the Atlas, lots of folks were telling me about all the cool bald eagles that they were seeing. I love to hear about it. I love to see a bald eagle. They're huge and very majestic and awesome to see out in the wild. So a really great story of bald eagles kind of coming back around and having a range expansion here. Okay, next is purple martin. I alluded to this a little bit in the previous slide, showing the differences in the biggest increases and biggest decreases between Atlas 1 and Atlas 2. So that decline has continued on into Atlas 3. As you can see, Atlas 1, the purple martins were kind of all the way up to Sault Ste. Marie. And then Atlas 2, their range really shrunk. And then by Atlas 3, it's really just kind of those, especially along Lake Erie, there's a bit of a stronghold, and then the North Shore of Lake Ontario. So yeah, those decreases have continued since the 1980s. The last kind of GIF I'm going to show here is the trumpeter swan. So trumpeter swans in Atlas 1 were not present in Ontario in the wild. So yeah, that Atlas 1 map is not a mistake. They just were not present. Then there was a reintroduction program to reintroduce trumpeter swans in Ontario. And you can see them expanding from there in Atlas 2 and then Atlas 3. So a really great story of trumpeter swan recovery and expansion in Ontario, which is really awesome. If anyone's seen trumpeter swans, a lot of them do have kind of those tags on their wings for tracking to ensure the population is continuing to grow and be self-sustaining. But yeah, has anyone seen trumpeter swans around? Oh, I see some chat, sorry. Yes, see them often. See several in Lake Simcoe. Yep, the trumpeter swans are very cool. I love to see their little cygnets too, especially as you see in this picture. Very cute and a very awesome story about that range expansion. Oh, yes, more comments. See them in Lake Ontario. Yep, yeah, I live in Hamilton. And whenever I go to LaSalle, I always see lots of trumpeter swans, and I love to hear them. They actually really do sound like trumpets. I wish I had put like one of those little sound snippets on this slide. Okay, cool. How can you contribute? This is all really great info, but where do we go from here? I mentioned that unfortunately, the Ontario Bird Atlas data collection period is over, which is quite sad, but there's other ways to get involved, which is awesome. You know, programs like the Atlas help us understand birds across Ontario. So yeah, there's some other really cool programs to get involved with and even share sightings from your own property. So the key thing is you don't need to be an expert. A lot of people come to me and they say, you know, I'm not quite a birder, or I'm like a new birder. And in my mind, if you like birds and you like watching them or recording them or doing whatever, then you are a birder. There is no minimum skill level to be a birder. You just have to like birds and like watching them. So don't let that stop you. You can participate at your level, and I will tell you how. All right. The first is Project Feeder Watch. This one has just ended, but I would definitely mark it on your calendar for next year, especially if you have a feeder. And so it's one of the easiest ways to get involved in community science. I would say that it's like pretty low commitment level. It runs through the winter months from November 1st until April 30th. Those are always the months where I kind of feel like, you know, things are dreary and you don't necessarily notice the birds as much. So I feel like Feeder Watch is a great opportunity to really try your best to notice birds and be like, oh, there is still stuff around. It's not, you know, completely gray. So from November 1st to April 30th, that's when birds are often easier to observe around homes and properties, especially if you do have a feeder. You choose a spot to watch birds. It could be a feeder, but it doesn't have to be if you don't have one. You can also count birds in your yard or surrounding area. You count the birds you see over a 2-day period. And you can do that as often as you like. You can do it weekly, occasionally, or even kind of just once during the season. It's nice that way that you can pick your commitment level. If you just want to do it once and then, the rest of your wintertime is busy, that's totally fine. But if you've got nothing better going on over the wintertime than watching birds, then, that's awesome too. So yeah, it's very flexible. Doesn't take much time. You don't need any special experience, just an interest in noticing the birds around you. All of those observations help researchers understand how winter bird populations are changing across large areas. So, some people didn't notice cardinals kind of staying over the winter time up until recently. So those sorts of things are tracked by Project Feeder Watch. Are the cardinals sticking around more? Are more individuals staying around? That sort of thing. All right, the Great Backyard Bird Count is similar, but it's in February. It's probably, similar to Feeder Watch, an easy way to get involved. It's a global event that takes place over 4 days each February. All you need to do is spend at least 15 minutes watching birds, either in your backyard, on your property, or anywhere that you happen to be. You make a list of the birds that you see or hear, and then submit that information online using tools like eBird or the Merlin Bird ID app that I mentioned earlier. Again, you don't need any prior experience, and you don't have to commit a lot of time. So even that 15 minutes, is very useful information. Let's see. Yeah, even robins are staying all year. Definitely, we had some robins around. We had some goldfinches, cardinals. So that sort of information is great information to capture on Project Feeder Watch. All right, next up, Project Nest Watch. So this one is one that hasn't passed just yet. It's a little bit more hands-on, but still very accessible, especially if you have birds nesting on your property. So one such bird that's pretty obvious when you see it is the barn swallow, which I've included a photograph of here. If you have that in your barn, you usually know about it. The young can be quite loud. The program focuses on monitoring nests during the breeding season. So when they're here and nesting, of course. If you find a nest, whether it's in a tree or shrub or on a building, you record what's happening there over time. So that might include things like when eggs are laid, when they hatch, and how many young successfully leave the nest. Usually participants visit the nest every few days to record what they see, following guidelines from Nest Watch to make sure that the birds aren't disturbed. So that's a very big part of it, is making sure that you follow the guidelines, and Project Nest Watch will give you, instructions ahead of time. That kind of information is really valuable because it helps researchers understand how successful birds are at raising their young. So maybe a reason for population decline in certain species could be that, raising their young, most don't make it to maturity. So interesting to see how that might be changing over time. If you've ever had robins nesting on your yard or swallows on a building, it's a great way to turn that observation into something that contributes to the overall kind of science. All right, that's it for the community science piece, but I did want to mention that there's other really great resources on the Birds Canada website. There's Gardening for Birds, which is a really cool tool on the Birds Canada website that tells you, what plant species you might be able to plant depending on where you are and what you're trying to attract. We also have a Birds Canada Learn platform where there's like courses or volunteer training or additional resources that you could take a look at. I should mention that the courses are free of charge. I think there's an intro to birding course on there and some other really neat things. So those are on the Birds Canada website, birdscanada.org. Okay, so that's it. Thank you, everyone. I loved hearing about the birds that you've seen on your properties. I'm wondering if anyone has any questions, and I'm just including my email address here and the Birds Canada website again. Maybe I'll leave that up for just a minute or two, and then I'll close it so that I can answer questions and I'm just not a small screen.
Well, thank you so much, Kaylin, for that presentation. That was incredible. It was really, really cool to see the Atlas data and really nice presentations of the maps moving through those different points. You said you broke 4 million records.
4 million records, yep.
That is inspiring.
4 million records is It's mind-boggling to me. That's why I mean, I'm biased. I love the Atlas, of course I do. But it's such a huge project and so many people are really, really dedicated to it. And just the amount of data that can go into, conserving birds and their habitats is honestly amazing.
Yeah, could you speak any more about how the research, what the next steps with the research is, how that leads to
Yeah.
conserving habitats?
Absolutely, yeah. So for each of those bird species, of course, we have those distribution maps that I showed. And so we have between the 80s up until the 2020s and, how many squares they've been in, like increased or decreased. So that is what we call a range expansion or contraction. And then we also have those heat maps that I was showing. We're able to compare those between Atlas 2 and Atlas 3 and showing how relative abundance has changed between the two. So based on a combination of those two maps and data, we essentially the government takes that information and uses them in their species at risk reports and their like other management reports. And then we also work with like Ontario Parks or other land managers like the Greenbelt Foundation to let them know how birds are doing in their areas. And as a result, they're able to better manage their properties or, do what they feel is best with their properties based on that information.
I'd love to hear it. Well, we do have some time available for Q&A. There's one question in there right now, and I have a couple of my own that I
Of
would love
course,
to ask
yeah,
too.
yeah.
But we'll start with the one in the Q&A box. Asked that, is it true that putting out grape jelly for orioles can be dangerous for hummingbirds? Is that something you can speak to?
Hmm. Um, Yeah, I don't like fully know the answer to that. I can see why people might think that jelly, generally speaking, could be sticky for such a small bird or any small birds. But I guess it would likely depend on the vessel, I guess, the jelly vessel, how that's put out, how easy it is. If you just spread jelly on your railings, then I'm sure that would be bad for all sorts of birds. But I think it would likely depend on how you're putting it
Maybe
out there.
also bring a lot of ants up.
Yeah, that doesn't sound very fun.
Right, well, thank you for that answer. I noticed in one of your slides between Atlas 2 and 3, there were two new species in Atlas 3. Do you know offhand what those were that weren't detected in
Um,
Atlas 2?
yeah, blackneck stilt bred successfully for the first time in Atlas 3. And then we had blue grosbeak as
Very
well.
cool. Are those coming up from the south?
Yes, yep, coming up from the south. Yeah, and both of them were kind of in the Essex, like London, Middlesex, Essex kind of area.
Fantastic.
Yeah, very cool, very exciting.
You also said that you studied barn swallows,
I
or
did.
swallows particularly. And I've always been curious because I go to a horse stable where we do have lots of barn swallows nesting. They seem very happy there, but what would their original nesting habitat have been before the
Yeah.
barns?
It's a great question. And yeah, it's like cliff faces or overhangs. So you can kind of see how that would make sense if you've seen a barn swallow and the way they nest kind of close to the ceiling on something that's close to the wall. And so a lot, yeah, it would be like cliff overhang kind of things.
We already had something called cliff swallows.
Yeah, so we
So
just couldn't do another one. Yeah.
one.
Yeah. Do you have cliff swallows in the barn as well? A lot of the places I
No,
work at had both.
no, well, not to my knowledge. I
They
have
have, you would know, they have like a gourd shaped nest instead of a cup shaped nest. Sorry, I'm like trying to show it with my hands. It's not very effective.
I'll give a couple more minutes in case anyone else has any questions. I
Yeah.
also want to say thanks for sharing some new project types with us. As we were speaking earlier, community science is something that's very, very important to me because I discovered it during my master's and it was a whole new philosophy of something that I felt was very, very empowering to get involved and feel like my contribution was having a real world impact. So
Absolutely.
I'm not sure about nesting habitat that I can easily see and monitor without
That's
disturbing the
okay.
birds.
There's
So
other projects too, depending on where you are. And sorry, I was just seeing that there's something for gardening for birds, so I'm just making a note. But yeah, there's also like the Canadian or North American Nightjar Survey if you're interested in surveying for nightjars. Um, there's owl surveys, they're a little bit further north, I think the ones that are available. There you can always do Swift Watch if you're interested in surveying for swifts. There's so many cool community science projects that are out there. So yeah, definitely if Nest Watch isn't going to work for you, then there's lots of other ones available, and you can always check out the Birds Canada website as well.
I think I did see what you saw. Some questions in the chat. Are mourning doves declining? I'm seeing a lot less.
Yeah, I'm just one Gardening for Birds website. I'm going to pop in the chat here. I think mourning doves are actually ones that are pretty stable, and so I'm wondering if they're potentially, having some competition there, or if they've been like predated and potentially not in the like trying to stay away from the area. There's lots of different reasons you might be seeing kind of different fluctuations in the bird species, but still honestly like a great thing to report because something, as simple as that could be a sign of something bigger. You never know. So that's why I always submit my data places.
I wonder if anyone in the chat, can you share if you already use Merlin or eBird or iNaturalist or another platform that you'd recommend?
Yeah. Yeah, eBird is another really great one that lots of folks use. Yep, Merlin,
All
use
three?
all three. Nice.
I did my first eBird list of the year
Woohoo!
last weekend. I know you certainly can during the winter, but my fingers get so cold.
I know. Yeah, I when I eBird in the wintertime, I like keep my hands in my pockets and I just try to like recite. I feel like I'm reciting like a grocery list in my head. I'm like, okay, there are three robins and two, and then every once in a while I take it out and put everything in and then I put it back in my pockets again. So definitely a challenge there. Some more folks using Merlin and all three. My dad uses Merlin. He has a feeder in his backyard, and I think every morning he usually goes out and he uses Merlin and he screenshots it and he sends it to me over text.
We have the same tradition.
Yeah, I love that. Or he'll take a picture of his bird feeder and send it to me, and we identify things together, which I really love.
I think we have satisfied a lot of people's curiosity and questions already today. So
Awesome.
I'd like to say thank you very much, everyone who was able to join us. Like I said, this recording will be available. It may take a little bit of time to process it, but I can guarantee by the end of the week, it will be sent by email to everyone who registered. I will include Bill's contact information and anything, Kaylin, you would like to share. I can put that on there too.
Great. Awesome. Yeah, thanks everyone. It was honestly really great chatting with you all and hearing about the birds that you guys have in your yards and properties, and best of luck with your birding.
Thanks so much. Have a great night, everyone.
Thanks everyone. Bye-bye.